Samuel Thornton threw his mother's wedding ring into the dirt. 15 years he'd kept it. 15 years waiting for a woman who wanted him, not his land, not his horses, not the empire he'd built from ashes and blood. Every woman in Colorado had tried. Every single one had failed. He was done waiting. The ring lay there in the summer dust, catching the morning light like a broken promise. Sam turned his back and walked toward the barn. He didn't know that 3 miles away, a woman with blood on her sleeve was about to change everything. Subscribe to channel name and turn on notifications so you don't miss how this story ends. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The ring had belonged to his mother for 22 years before the outlaws took her life. Sam remembered how it caught the firelight when she stirred the evening stew, how his father would kiss her hand every morning, like she was still the young bride he'd married. He remembered the blood on the cabin floor. He remembered being 14 and alone. Now he stared at the small gold band lying in the dirt of his ranch yard, and he felt nothing. That was the worst part. He should feel something, grief maybe, or hope, something other than this hollow emptiness that had lived in his chest for so long. He'd forgotten what fullness felt like. "You're going to regret that." Sam didn't turn around. He knew his brother's voice like he knew his own heartbeat. "Stay out of it, Jake." Jacob Thornton walked up beside him, 28 years old, and still acting like he was 12. He bent down and picked up the ring, brushing off the dust with his thumb. "Ma would tan your hide if she saw you treating her ring like trash." "Ma's dead." "Don't mean she ain't watching." Sam finally looked at his younger brother. Jake had their mother's easy smile, their father's broad shoulders. He'd inherited the charm that had skipped right over Sam, the ability to walk into a room and make everyone feel like old friends. Sam had inherited the silence, the walls, the stubborn refusal to let anyone close enough to hurt him again. "Give it back," Sam said. Jake closed his fist around the ring. "Nope. I'm holding on to this until you come to your senses." "My senses are fine." "Your senses are broken, brother. Have been for 15 years. Jake tucked the ring into his vest pocket. "What happened this time? Let me guess. The banker's daughter." Sam's jaw tightened. "She asked how many acres the ranch covered. First question out of her mouth." So maybe she was curious. She was calculating. There's a difference. Sam turned toward the barn. "I've got horses to train. Some of us work for a living." "Some of us don't hide from living," Jake called after him. Sam didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that his brother's words were like summer storms, loud and flashy, but they passed quick enough if you just waited them out. Inside the barn, the familiar smell of hay and horse sweat wrapped around him like an old blanket. This he understood. Animals didn't lie. They didn't calculate your worth based on your land holdings. They either trusted you or they didn't, and if they didn't, it was because you'd earned their suspicion, not because they wanted something from you. His prize stallion, a black Morgan named Midnight, nickered softly as Sam approached his stall. "At least you're honest about what you want," Sam murmured, pulling an apple from his pocket. "Food and freedom. Simple." The horse took the apple with velvet lips, and Sam allowed himself a rare smile. This was enough. It had to be enough. The ranch, the horses, the work that kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. He didn't need a wife, didn't need children, didn't need anyone looking at him with expectations he couldn't meet. He'd tried that once, nearly destroyed him. "Mr. Thornton." Sam turned to find his foreman standing in the barn door, hat in hand. Miguel Reyes had worked the ranch for 8 years, ever since Sam had found him half dead from fever on the road to Denver. He was the closest thing Sam had to a friend, which meant they rarely spoke about anything other than horses and weather. "What is it?" "There's been an accident on the North Road. Stagecoach overturned at Miller's Crossing." Sam frowned. "Anyone hurt?" "Don't know yet. Sheriff's asking for men to help clear the road. Thought you'd want to know since you're heading to town for supplies anyway." Sam nodded slowly. He didn't particularly want to go to town. Town meant people, and people meant questions about why he wasn't married yet, when he was going to settle down, whether he'd heard about the new school teacher from St. Louis, who was just lovely, and would make someone a wonderful wife. But duty was duty. A man didn't turn his back on folks in need, even if those folks would spend the next month gossiping about him. "Saddle up my horse," he said. "I'll head out now." The ride to Miller's Crossing took half an hour at a steady pace. Sam could have pushed faster, but there was no point in exhausting his horse for what was probably nothing more than a broken axle and some scattered luggage. The summer heat pressed down on him like a wool blanket, and he tugged his hat lower to shade his eyes from the midday glare. He heard the commotion before he saw it. Men shouting, horses, whinnying, the creak and groan of wood being moved. When he crested the hill overlooking the crossing, he pulled his horse to a stop. The stagecoach lay on its side like a wounded animal, one wheel still spinning lazily in the air. 3 men were working to right it, while the driver sat on a rock, holding a bloody cloth to his head. A woman in a blue dress stood apart from the group, arguing with a man Sam recognized as Deputy Wilson. "I told you I don't need a doctor," she was saying as Sam rode closer. "I need my trunk. There are medical supplies inside that—" "Ma'am, you're bleeding," the deputy interrupted. "You need to sit down and—" "I'm a doctor's daughter. I know when I'm bleeding, and I know this is nothing more than a scratch." Her voice was steady, but Sam caught the slight tremor beneath the words. "What I also know is that the driver has a possible concussion, and that man over there," she pointed to one of the workers, "is favoring his left leg in a way that suggests a sprained ankle at minimum. So instead of arguing with me about whether I need to sit down, perhaps you could help me retrieve my supplies so I can actually be useful." Deputy Wilson's face reddened. "Now see here, Miss. It's Mrs. Actually, it's—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "Never mind what it is. The point remains." Sam dismounted without consciously deciding to do so. Something about the woman had caught his attention, though he couldn't say what. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, hanging in sweaty tangles around a face that was too angular to be pretty, with a nose that was slightly too long and a mouth that was slightly too wide. But there was something in the way she held herself spine straight and chin lifted that made it impossible to look away. She was terrified. He could see it now that he was closer. The slight shake in her hands, the way her eyes kept darting to the road behind her, the tension in her shoulders that had nothing to do with the accident. She was terrified, and she was hiding it behind a wall of competence and sharp words. Sam understood walls. He'd built enough of his own. "The lady asked for her trunk," he heard himself say. "Where is it?" Deputy Wilson turned, relief and irritation warring on his face. "Mr. Thornton, didn't see you ride up." "Clearly. The trunk?" "We haven't had time to sort through the luggage yet. The coach—" "I'll find it myself." Sam turned to the woman. "What's it look like?" She blinked at him, momentarily thrown off balance by his directness. Up close, her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight, and there was a bruise forming on her left cheekbone that made something in Sam's chest tighten with an emotion he refused to name. "Brown leather," she said after a moment. "Brass fittings. My father's initials on the lid. H.W." Sam nodded and walked toward the overturned coach without another word. The other men had managed to right it partially, creating enough space to access the luggage compartment. He found the trunk she'd described wedged behind a hatbox and a carpet bag, and he hauled it out with more care than he usually afforded anyone's belongings. When he carried it back to her, she was already kneeling beside the driver, examining his head wound with gentle, competent fingers. "It's not as bad as it looks," she was telling him. "Head wounds bleed heavily. You'll have a headache for a few days, but you'll live." She looked up as Sam set the trunk beside her. "Thank you." "You're welcome." She opened the trunk, and Sam caught a glimpse of neatly organized medical supplies. Bandages, bottles of various liquids, instruments he didn't recognize. She worked quickly, cleaning the driver's wound and wrapping it with practiced efficiency. "You really are a doctor's daughter," Sam said. "Was." She didn't look up from her work. "He died 6 months ago." "I'm sorry." So am I. She moved to the man with the injured ankle next, and Sam found himself following her like a lost dog. He told himself it was because he wanted to make sure she didn't collapse. That cut on her arm was still bleeding, soaking through her sleeve in a way that concerned him, but the truth was something more uncomfortable. He couldn't stop watching her. The way she spoke to the injured man, firm but kind. The way her hands moved with sure confidence, despite the tremor he'd noticed earlier. The way she didn't ask for help, didn't expect it, just did what needed to be done. When she finally finished, she sat back on her heels and pressed a hand to her forehead. The movement made her wince, and for the first time Sam saw the exhaustion beneath the competence. "Your turn," he said. She looked up at him. "Excuse me. Your arm, let me see it." "It's fine. It's still bleeding." "I'm aware." "Then you're aware you need to let someone look at it." "I can look at it myself." "With what your other arm's too short to reach." She stared at him for a long moment, and Sam saw something flicker in those honey-colored eyes. Suspicion, maybe, or calculation. The same look he'd seen in 100 women who saw him as a means to an end. But no, that wasn't quite right. This was different. This was the look of someone who'd been burned and wasn't eager to touch fire again. He understood that look too. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I'm not going to expect anything in return. I'm just offering to help because you need it, and I'm here." She let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it had any humor in it. "You don't even know my name." "Don't need to know your name to see you're bleeding." Another long pause. Then slowly, she extended her arm. The cut was deeper than he'd expected, running along her forearm in a jagged line that would definitely scar. He cleaned it with water from his canteen and bandaged it with supplies from her own trunk, working as gently as he knew how. "Margaret," she said quietly. He looked up. "What?" "My name, Margaret Hayes. Most people call me Maggie." "Sam Thornton." "I know who you are." He frowned. "How?" "The deputy called you Mr. Thornton, and you don't look like anyone's deputy. That means you're someone important enough to be recognized by title alone." She gestured vaguely at his clothes, his horse, the quality of his boots. "Wealthy but not soft. Rancher probably. The largest spread around here belongs to a man named Thornton, so either you're him or you're his brother." Sam felt an unexpected smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "You always this observant." "My father taught me to pay attention. He said observation was half of diagnosis." "Smart man. The smartest I ever knew." Sam finished tying off the bandage and released her arm. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Where are you headed?" Sam asked. "Silver Ridge. I was hoping to find work." "What kind of work?" "Any kind." She stood brushing dust from her skirt with her uninjured hand. "I can cook, clean, keep books. I have medical training, though no official credentials. I'm not afraid of hard labor." "What you are is desperate." She flinched as if he'd slapped her. "I prefer determined." Desperate people make dangerous decisions. And judgmental people make poor first impressions. Sam blinked. He couldn't remember the last time someone had snapped back at him like that. Most people either tiptoed around him because of his wealth or avoided him entirely because of his reputation for coldness. This woman did neither. She stood before him, battered and bleeding and alone, and she met his eyes without flinching. "You're right," he said. "That was out of line. I apologize." Now it was her turn to blink. "You apologize? I'm capable of admitting when I'm wrong." "That's rare in a man." "So I've been told." Deputy Wilson approached, interrupting whatever might have come next. "Miss Hayes, the stage will be delayed at least until tomorrow. We need to get the wheel repaired. There's a boarding house in town where you can stay." "I don't have money for a boarding house." Sam spoke before he could stop himself. "I'll cover it." Maggie's eyes snapped to his face. "No. It's not charity. Consider it payment for services rendered. You helped my men today." "They're not your men." "One of them is. Miguel there with the ankle. He works my ranch. You patched him up. That's worth a night's lodging. I don't accept payment for medical care. Then accept it as a loan. Pay me back when you find work. She studied him with those sharp honey eyes, and Sam knew she was trying to find the angle, the catch, the hidden expectation that would reveal his true motives. She wouldn't find one, because there wasn't one. He didn't know why he was helping her. He didn't help people. He kept to himself, minded his own business, and avoided entanglements of any kind. But something about Margaret Hayes had gotten under his skin in a way he couldn't explain and didn't particularly want to examine. "Fine," she said finally. "A loan. I'll pay you back with interest." "No interest." "Interest or nothing." "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Good. Then we understand each other." She turned and walked toward the salvaged luggage, leaving Sam standing there like a fool. Jake would laugh himself sick if he could see this. The great Samuel Thornton, brought up short by a woman with a bleeding arm and a tongue sharp enough to cut glass. He should walk away. He should get on his horse ride into town, buy his supplies, and forget he ever met her. In a week, she'd find work or move on or do whatever desperate women did, and he'd never see her again. That would be the smart thing to do. That would be the safe thing. Sam watched Maggie Hayes struggle to lift her trunk with one good arm, watched her refuse help from two men who offered, watched her finally accept assistance only when it became clear she couldn't manage alone. And he knew with a certainty that settled into his bones like winter cold that walking away wasn't an option anymore. The boarding house in Silver Ridge was run by a widow named Ruth Pemberton. She was 58 years old, sharp as a tack, and had a reputation for asking no questions as long as you paid your bill and didn't cause trouble. Sam led Maggie there himself, ignoring the curious looks from townspeople who had never seen him escort a woman anywhere. 2 weeks, he told Ruth, pressing money into her hand. "Room and board, and don't let her pay you back, she'll try." Ruth's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "Samuel Thornton playing benefactor? Never thought I'd see the day. Don't make more of it than it is. Wouldn't dream of it." Maggie had already disappeared upstairs with her trunk, refusing help carrying it despite the obvious strain on her injured arm. Sam stood in Ruth's parlor, feeling foolish and exposed, and entirely uncertain why he'd come this far, instead of just giving directions and riding away. "She's running from something," Ruth said quietly. Sam looked at her. "How do you know? Been running a boarding house for 20 years. You learn to recognize the signs." She lowered her voice. "Saw a man asking about a woman matching her description in Holbrook last week. Well-dressed, Eastern accent. Not the kind of man who takes no for an answer." Sam's hands curled into fists at his sides. "If anyone comes asking about her, I don't know nothing about nobody who stays under my roof." Ruth smiled grimly. "That's my policy, and I ain't about to change it for some fancy man from back east." Sam nodded slowly. He should leave now. Go back to his ranch, his horses, his carefully constructed solitude. Whatever trouble Maggie Hayes was running from it wasn't his problem, but he thought about the fear in her eyes. The way she'd flinched when he called her desperate. The tremor in her hands that she'd hidden so well. "If she needs work," he heard himself say, "send her to the ranch. I've got horses that could use someone with medical training." Ruth's smile widened. "Samuel Thornton, you old fool. Don't start. Wouldn't dream of it. But your mama's looking down right now, and I'll bet you anything she's laughing." Sam left without responding because there was nothing to say. His mother probably was laughing. She'd always said his stubbornness would be his downfall. He just hadn't expected it to feel quite so much like salvation. 3 days later, Maggie Hayes arrived at the Thornton Ranch. She came in a borrowed wagon, her single trunk in the back, and a letter from Ruth Pemberton in her hand. The letter said she was a hard worker who didn't complain and didn't pry, which was about the highest recommendation Ruth ever gave anyone. Sam met her in the yard, telling himself the flutter in his chest was just surprise. "Mrs. Pemberton said you might have work," Maggie said without preamble, "for someone with medical training." "Might. Is that a yes or a no? It's a might, depends. On what? On whether you can actually do what you claim. Anyone can say they have medical training. Proving it's another matter. Her chin lifted. Show me a sick animal and I'll prove it. Sam almost smiled. Almost. This way. He led her to the barn, to a stall in the back where his second-best mare lay on fresh straw, breathing shallowly. The local veterinarian had come out twice and declared there was nothing to be done. The horse would either recover on her own, or she wouldn't. Sam had been sleeping in the barn for 3 nights, unwilling to let her die alone. Maggie knelt beside the mare without hesitation, running her hands along the animal's sides, checking her eyes, her mouth, her hooves. Her movements were sure and competent, just as they'd been at the accident site. When did she stop eating? She asked. 4 days ago. And the veterinarian said what exactly? That it was some kind of infection, that there was nothing he could do. Maggie made a sound that might have been contempt. Did he check her teeth? Her teeth. Horses can develop abscesses in their teeth just like humans. If untreated, the infection can spread and cause... She trailed off her fingers, probing the mare's jaw. The horse flinched. There, feel that swelling. Sam crouched beside her, and she guided his hand to a spot beneath the mare's jaw that was hot and hard to the touch. He felt like a fool for missing it. Can you fix it? He asked. I can try. I'll need to lance the abscess and drain it. It'll be messy and the horse won't like it, but if I'm right, she should start improving within a day or 2. And if you're wrong... She met his eyes. Then she's no worse off than she was before. Sam held her gaze for a long moment. There it was again, that directness, that refusal to make promises she couldn't keep. Every other person who'd offered to help with the mare had guaranteed results. Maggie Hayes guaranteed only effort. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to him in years. Do it, he said. The next hour was exactly as messy as she'd promised. The mare screamed and thrashed, and it took 3 men to hold her still while Maggie worked. Blood and pus, and worse things, flowed from the incision. But Maggie never flinched, never hesitated, never stopped talking, in that low, steady voice that seemed to calm both the animal and the men holding her. When it was over, she sat back on her heels, covered in things Sam didn't want to think about, and let out a long breath. Now we wait, she said. How long? 24 hours. If she starts eating again, we're on the right track. Sam nodded slowly. He looked at this woman, exhausted, filthy, kneeling in a barn next to a horse that might still die, and he felt something crack open in his chest. You're hired, he said. Maggie looked up at him. Just like that. Just like that. Room and board, fair wages, and complete respectability. You'll have your own quarters. My brother and the ranch hands will treat you with respect, or they'll answer to me. And if the mare dies, then you tried. That's more than anyone else did. She was quiet for the long moment. Then slowly she stood. There's something you should know before I accept. Sam felt the familiar tension creep back into his shoulders. Here it came. The catch. The revelation. The reason she was too good to be true. I'm being followed, she said quietly, by a man who believes he owns me. He's dangerous and he's wealthy, and he will eventually find me here. If you take me in, you're taking on that trouble too. Sam waited for the fear to come. The instinct for self-preservation that should tell him to walk away, to protect himself, to maintain the careful distance that had kept him safe for 15 years. It didn't come. Instead, he felt something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like purpose. What's his name? He asked. Victor Ashworth. And what does he want? Maggie's honey eyes hardened. He wants a wife who will give him access to her father's medical research and her family's connections. He wants a woman who will smile and nod and never question him. He wants ownership. She paused. He doesn't want me. He wants what I represent. Sam understood that. God help him, he understood it perfectly. "Welcome to the Thornton Ranch, Miss Hayes," he said. "Let him come." The words hung in the summer air between them, heavy with promise and danger, and something neither of them was ready to name. 24 hours later, the mare ate her first meal in almost a week, and Sam Thornton, who had spent 15 years building walls around his heart, felt the first stone begin to crumble. The first week passed like water through fingers. Maggie worked from dawn until her hands ached, and then she worked some more. She tended the horses with a devotion that surprised even herself, learning their names and their temperaments, and the particular way each one liked to be touched. Midnight. Sam's prize stallion had taken to her, immediately pressing his velvet nose against her palm whenever she passed his stall. The mare she'd saved, Bella, the hands called her, followed Maggie around the barn like a lovesick puppy. "Never seen anything like it," Miguel said one morning, watching Bella trail Maggie to the water trough. "That horse wouldn't let anyone near her for 2 years after Mr. Thornton bought her. Now look at her." Maggie smiled and said nothing. She understood Bella in a way she couldn't explain. They were both creatures who had learned to fear human hands, and they were both slowly, painfully learning to trust again. Sam watched her. She felt his eyes on her constantly, though he rarely spoke more than necessary. He would appear in the barn doorway while she worked, arms crossed, face unreadable. He would pass her at meals and nod just once before retreating to his study. He would ride out at dawn and return at dusk, always alone, always silent. She didn't know what to make of him. The other men on the ranch were easy enough to understand. Miguel was kind and quiet, still grateful for the way she'd tended his ankle. The younger hands were curious but respectful, keeping their distance as Sam had clearly instructed. Even Ruth Pemberton, who visited twice to check on her, was straightforward in her opinions and expectations. But Sam Thornton was a locked door, and Maggie couldn't find the key. "He wasn't always like this," Jake told her one afternoon. Maggie looked up from the bridle she was mending. Sam's younger brother had made a habit of appearing whenever Sam wasn't around, full of easy smiles and easier conversation. She didn't entirely trust him, but she didn't distrust him either. He was too open to be dangerous. "Like what?" she asked. "Closed off. Cold." Jake leaned against the fence, squinting into the summer sun. "When we were kids, Sam was the one who laughed loudest, the one who made friends with everyone. Ma used to say he had enough love in his heart for the whole territory." "What changed?" Jake's smile faded. "Our parents died. And then—" He stopped, shook his head. "It ain't my story to tell, but there was a woman about 5 years after." Sam thought she was different, thought she saw him for who he really was. Maggie's hand stilled on the leather. "What happened?" "She was engaged to a man back east the whole time. Rich fellow. She was just playing with Sam, seeing if she could make the stone-hearted bachelor fall for her." Jake's voice hardened. "When he found out, something in him just died. He hasn't let anyone close since." Maggie absorbed this information in silence. She thought about the way Sam had looked at her that first day, measuring her for hidden motives. She thought about the careful distance he maintained, never touching her, rarely speaking to her, but always watching. He was waiting for her to reveal herself as a fraud, just like the woman before her. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Jake grinned, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the charming rogue the townspeople probably thought he was. "Because I've seen the way he looks at you when you're not watching, and I've seen the way you look at him." He pushed off the fence. "Someone's got to break through those walls of his. Might as well be someone who understands what it's like to build them." He walked away before she could respond. That night, Maggie couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room off the kitchen, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into darkness. Somewhere outside, a horse nickered softly. The wind rustled through the grass. A coyote howled in the distance. She thought about Victor. She thought about the last time she'd seen him standing in her father's study with that cold smile on his face. Her father had been dead for 3 days. The funeral was the next morning, and Victor had come to inform her that the wedding would proceed as planned, that her father's debts would be forgiven, as part of the arrangement that she should be grateful for his generosity. She remembered the way his hand had closed around her wrist when she'd tried to refuse. The bruises had taken 2 weeks to fade. She'd run that same night, packed one trunk with everything she could carry and slipped out the back door while Victor dined with her father's colleagues already dividing up the estate like vultures picking at a carcass. 3 months of running. 3 months of looking over her shoulder. 3 months of waiting for him to find her. And now she was here in a stranger's house falling for a man who didn't trust her and probably never would. She was a fool. A soft knock at her door made her bolt upright, heart hammering. "Miss Hayes," Sam's voice low and rough. "You awake?" She pulled on her robe and opened the door a crack. "What is it?" "Midnight's acting strange. Won't let anyone near him. Thought you might—" He trailed off, and even in the dim lamplight, she could see the discomfort on his face. Asking for help didn't come naturally to him. "I'll come." The barn was dark except for a single lantern hanging near Midnight's stall. The stallion was pacing, tossing his head, making sounds of distress that sent the other horses shifting nervously in their own enclosures. "Started about an hour ago," Sam said. "I've tried everything. He usually calms down for me, but tonight—" He shook his head. Maggie approached the stall, slowly keeping her voice soft. "Easy, boy, easy. What's got you so worked up?" Midnight's ears swiveled toward her. He stopped pacing, nostrils flaring. "That's it," she murmured. "That's it. Nothing to be afraid of." She opened the stall door and slipped inside. Sam made a sound of protest, but she ignored him. Midnight stood trembling as she approached, his dark eyes rolling with fear. And then she saw it. "There's a snake," she said quietly. "In the corner. Don't move." Sam went rigid. "What kind?" "I can't tell in this light, but Midnight knows it's there. That's why he's panicking." "I'll get a shovel." "No. Any sudden movement and it might strike." Maggie kept her eyes on the coiled shape in the corner, barely visible in the shadows. "I need you to open the back door of the stall, slowly. Give Midnight an escape route." "And what are you going to do?" "Keep it focused on me." "Like hell you are." "Sam." She turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. "Trust me." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them acknowledged. Sam moved to the back of the stall. The door creaked as he eased it open. Midnight's ears pricked toward the sound. "Go on, boy," Maggie whispered. "Go on. Get out of here." The stallion hesitated for one agonizing moment. Then he bolted through the open door and into the paddock beyond. The snake moved. Maggie threw herself backward, hitting the stall wall hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. The snake struck at empty air where she'd been standing, and before it could coil for another attack, Sam was there with a pitchfork pinning it to the ground. "Rattler," he said grimly. "Big one." Maggie slid down the wall until she was sitting in the hay, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. Sam killed the snake with a single efficient motion, then dropped the pitchfork and crossed to where she sat. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Maggie." His hand closed around her arm, gentle but firm. "Look at me." She looked up. His face was closer than she'd expected, close enough to see the fear that still lingered in his gray eyes. Fear for her. "I'm fine," she managed. "Just give me a minute." "Take all the time you need." He didn't let go of her arm. She didn't ask him to. They sat there in the hay, breathing together until the shaking stopped and the world settled back into something resembling normal. "Thank you," Sam said finally. "For what?" "Almost getting myself killed." "For saving my horse." Again. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You're making a habit of it." "Someone has to." He helped her to her feet, and for a moment they stood face to face in the dim lantern light. Maggie became acutely aware of how little she was wearing, just her nightgown and robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She should feel vulnerable, exposed. Instead, she felt safe. You should get some sleep. Sam said, his voice rougher than before. So should you. I will. I just need to check on Midnight first. Make sure he's settled. She nodded and turned to go. She was halfway to the barn door when his voice stopped her. Maggie. She looked back. Thank you for trusting me, he said. In the stall, when you asked me to open the door, you trusted me to do it right. You did. I know. But you didn't know I would. You trusted me anyway. He paused. I'm not used to that. Neither am I, she thought. But she didn't say it. She just nodded and walked back to the house, feeling his eyes on her the whole way. The next morning, everything changed. Maggie was hanging laundry when Jake rode up at a gallop, his horse lathered with sweat. Where's Sam? He demanded, barely waiting for the animal to stop before he was out of the saddle. In the north pasture. Why? What's wrong? Jake's face was grim. There's a man in town. Eastern fellow. Expensive suit. Asking questions about a woman who arrived on the stagecoach 3 weeks ago. The world tilted sideways. He found me, Maggie whispered. Not yet. Ruth sent him off with some story about a woman matching your description heading to Denver. But he's not stupid. He'll figure out the truth soon enough. Jake grabbed her shoulders. Maggie, who is this man? What does he want? She couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up her chest tight with a fear she'd been running from for 3 months. Maggie. His name is Victor Ashworth, she heard herself say. He's the man I was supposed to marry. The man I ran from. Why did you run? The question unlocked something inside her. The words came pouring out, the engagement arranged by her father before his death. Victor's true nature revealed only after the documents were signed, the bruises hidden beneath long sleeves and high collars, the night she'd fled with nothing but a trunk full of medical supplies and her father's research notes. He doesn't want me, she finished, her voice hollow. He wants my father's research. My father was working on something, a new treatment, a new technique. Victor invested heavily in it. Without me, without the notes, he loses everything. Jake's grip on her shoulders tightened. Does Sam know? He knows someone is following me. He doesn't know the details. He needs to know. I can't. Maggie. Jake's voice was firm. My brother has spent 15 years building walls around himself because he doesn't trust anyone. You're the first person he's let anywhere close since... He stopped, shook his head. If you don't tell him the truth, all of it, he's going to find out some other way. And then those walls will go back up so fast, you'll never get through them again. She knew he was right. She'd known it from the beginning. But the thought of seeing Sam's face when he learned the full extent of her troubles, the danger she'd brought to his doorstep. I'll leave, she said. Tonight, before Victor can trace me here. And go where run forever. Jake released her shoulders. Is that really what you want? No, God, no. She wanted to stay. She wanted this ranch, this life, this chance at something real. She wanted morning coffee with Sam, and late nights in the barn, and the slow, careful building of trust that felt more precious than anything she'd ever known. She wanted him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. I'll tell him, she said. Tonight. But Jake, if he asks me to leave after... He won't. How do you know? Jake's smile was sad and knowing. Because I haven't seen my brother look at anyone the way he looks at you in 15 years. And if there's one thing Sam Thornton doesn't do, it's give up on something he wants. That evening, Maggie waited on the porch. She heard Sam's horse before she saw him, the steady rhythm of hooves on packed earth. He appeared out of the gathering dusk like a ghost, tired and dust-covered, and more handsome than any man had a right to be. Maggie? He dismounted, frowning. What are you doing out here? Waiting for you. Is something wrong with the horses? No, the horses are fine. She stood, wrapping her arms around herself, even though the evening was warm. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you from the beginning. Sam's expression went carefully blank. She recognized that look. It was the same one he'd worn the day they met when he was measuring her for hidden motives. "Go on," he said. So she told him. Everything this time. The engagement, the abuse, the research, the money. Victor's connections to powerful men in Washington. The lawyers who would back his claim if he ever found her. The certainty that he would never stop looking, not because he loved her, but because she represented an investment he refused to lose. Sam listened without interrupting. His face revealed nothing, but she saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. She saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. When she finished, the silence stretched between them like a living thing. "Say something," she whispered. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. That you're angry. That you want me to leave. That you wish you'd never—" "I'm not angry at you." She blinked. "You're not—" "I'm angry at him." Sam's voice was low and dangerous, nothing like the careful neutrality he usually maintained. "I'm angry at a man who would put his hands on a woman, who would treat her like property, who would chase her across a country because she had the courage to refuse him." "Sam, I'm angry," he continued, "that you felt you couldn't tell me this from the start, that you thought I would blame you for running from a man who hurt you. I thought you would send me away." "Why?" "Because that's what everyone does." The words came out broken, sharp-edged with years of disappointment. "My father's colleagues, my friends, everyone who knew what Victor was, what he did. They all looked the other way because he was wealthy and connected, and I was just a woman with no power and no protection." Sam stepped closer, close enough that she could see the storm in his gray eyes, the barely contained fury that wasn't directed at her. "Do I look like the kind of man who looks the other way?" "No." "Then stop expecting me to." He reached up, and for one heart-stopping moment, Maggie thought he was going to touch her face. Instead, his hand stopped just short, hovering in the air between them like a question. "I spent 15 years believing that everyone who got close to me wanted something," he said quietly. "My land, my money, my horses. I convinced myself it was safer to be alone than to risk being used again. I understand." "No, you don't. Not yet." His hand dropped to his side. "You're the first person who's ever looked at me like I'm just a man. Not a prize to be won or a conquest to be claimed. Just me. Do you have any idea how terrifying that is?" Maggie's breath caught in her throat. "Yes, I know exactly how terrifying it is." "Good. Then you understand why I'm not going to let you run, why I'm not going to ask you to leave." His jaw tightened. "Victor Ashworth can come. Let him come. But he's not taking you anywhere. Not as long as I have breath in my body. You don't owe me anything. This isn't about owing. This is about—" He stopped, frustrated, searching for words that didn't come easily. "This is about the fact that I haven't slept through the night in 15 years, and last night after you saved midnight, I slept like a dead man. This is about the fact that I catch myself looking for you every time I walk into a room. This is about the fact that you make me want things I stopped letting myself want a long time ago." Maggie couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at this impossible man who was offering her something she'd never dared to hope for. "I'm not asking for anything," Sam said. "I'm not expecting anything. I just need you to know that whatever comes next, you're not facing it alone. Not anymore." She should say something. Something profound. Something meaningful. Something that matched the weight of what he'd just given her. Instead, she closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. It was a brief kiss, barely more than a brush of mouth against mouth. But it sent a shock through her entire body, a jolt of electricity that made her gasp. Sam went absolutely still. She pulled back suddenly, terrified that she'd made a terrible mistake. "I'm sorry," she started. "I shouldn't have—" His hand came up to cup her face, gentle as a whisper. "Don't you dare apologize." And then he was kissing her. Really kissing her. And the world fell away until there was nothing but the two of them, and the summer night, and the impossible, terrifying, wonderful feeling of finally being seen. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sam pressed his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens next," he said, "we face it together." "Together," she agreed. In the distance, a coyote howled at the rising moon. And 3 miles away in a hotel room in Silver Ridge, Victor Ashworth stared at a map of the surrounding ranches and smiled. He'd always enjoyed the hunt, and his prey was very, very close. The kiss changed everything and nothing. Sam still rose before dawn. He still worked the ranch with the same relentless focus. He still spoke in short sentences and avoided unnecessary words. But now when their eyes met across the breakfast table, something passed between them that made Maggie's heart stutter. Now when he passed her in the barn, his hand would brush against hers, just for a second, barely noticeable, and the touch would linger on her skin for hours. They didn't speak about what had happened on the porch. They didn't need to. Some things existed beyond words. But the knowledge of Victor's presence in town hung over them like a storm cloud, darkening even the brightest moments. "He's still at the hotel," Jake reported 3 days after the kiss. "Asking questions. Showing people a photograph." Maggie's blood ran cold. "A photograph?" "Your engagement portrait, from what I hear. The one that ran in the Boston papers." She remembered that portrait. Victor had insisted on it, wanted the whole world to see his prize. She'd smiled for the camera while his hand gripped her arm hard enough to leave bruises. "Has anyone told him where I am?" "Not yet. Ruth's been spreading stories about you heading to California. Most folks don't want to get involved with Eastern money and Eastern problems." Jake paused. "But someone will talk eventually. They always do." Sam had been silent throughout this exchange, his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on something only he could see. "Then we need to be ready," he said finally. "Ready for what?" Maggie asked. "For whatever he tries next." That afternoon, Sam did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He invited Maggie into his study. The room was smaller than she'd expected, lined with books and cluttered with papers. A large desk dominated one wall, and above it hung a portrait of a couple she immediately recognized as Sam's parents. They had the same gray eyes, the same strong jaw. "My father built this ranch from nothing," Sam said, following her gaze. "He came west with $10 and a dream, and by the time I was born, he owned more land than any man in the territory." He must have been remarkable. He was. Sam moved to the desk and pulled open a drawer. He also kept meticulous records. Every transaction, every contract, every legal document. He taught me that a man's word might be his bond, but paper is what holds up in court. He withdrew a thick leather folder and set it on the desk. "What is this?" Maggie asked. "Insurance." Sam opened the folder to reveal a stack of documents. Land deeds, cattle contracts, bank statements. "Everything that proves my ownership of this ranch is legal and uncontested." He looked up at her. "Victor Ashworth is a businessman. He understands leverage. Right now he thinks you're alone and unprotected, a woman with no resources and no allies." "I am alone and unprotected. Not anymore." Sam pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "I want to hire you, officially, as the ranch's veterinary specialist. A formal contract witnessed and filed with the county clerk." Maggie frowned. "Why?" "Because a contract makes you an employee with legal standing. It means Victor can't simply claim you and drag you away. Any dispute would have to go through the courts, and courts take time. Time for us to find another way." "Another way to what?" Sam's eyes met hers. "To stop him, permanently." She stared at him, this man who had spent 15 years avoiding entanglements of any kind, now weaving himself into her troubles with methodical precision. "You've thought about this," she said. "I've done nothing but think about this since Jake told me he was in town." "Why?" The question hung between them. Sam set down his pen and walked around the desk until he stood directly in front of her. "Because 3 weeks ago I threw my mother's ring in the dirt," he said quietly. "I'd given up. On love, on connection, on the possibility that anyone could want me for who I am, rather than what I own. And then you walked into my life with blood on your sleeve and fire in your eyes, and you made me want things I'd stopped believing in. Maggie's throat tightened. Sam? I'm not good at this. At saying what I feel. I've spent too long building walls to know how to tear them down gracefully. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But I know that I'm not willing to lose you. Not to Victor Ashworth, not to fear, not to anything. So if you'll let me, I'm going to fight for you. Even if you think you don't deserve it. Even if you think it's not worth the trouble. It's not about what I deserve. It's about what you'll lose. What will I lose? Everything. Her voice cracked. Victor has connections to senators, to judges. He could destroy your reputation, challenge your land rights, make your life a living hell. Let him try. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Sam's hands came up to frame her face. I understand that a man who hurts women is a coward. I understand that cowards rely on fear to maintain their power. And I understand that fear only works if you let it. His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. I spent 15 years letting fear control me. I'm done. Are you? She wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was a terrible idea, all the ways it could go wrong, all the damage Victor could inflict. But looking into Sam's gray eyes, seeing the determination there, the absolute refusal to back down, she felt something shift inside her. Maybe she was done too. Okay, she whispered. Okay, what? Okay. I'll sign your contract. Okay, I'll stay. Okay, I'll let you fight for me. She took a shaky breath. But I'm fighting too. I'm not going to hide behind you and wait for someone else to save me. Sam smiled a real smile, the kind that transformed his whole face. I wouldn't expect anything less. He kissed her then slow and deep, and for a few precious moments, the rest of the world ceased to exist. The contract was signed that evening with Jake and Miguel as witnesses. Official and legal, Jake declared, blotting the ink. Miss Margaret Hayes, veterinary specialist employed by the Thornton Ranch. Salary room and board. It feels strange, Maggie admitted. Signing a paper to prove I belong somewhere. Paper doesn't prove anything, Sam said. It just makes it harder for people to pretend otherwise. The next morning, Victor Ashworth came to the ranch. Maggie was in the barn when she heard the hoofbeats. 2 horses moving fast. She set down the brush she'd been using on Bella's coat and moved to the door, her heart already pounding. Sam was crossing the yard from the main house, Jake falling into step beside him. Their postures were casual, but Maggie had learned to read them well enough to see the tension in their shoulders, the readiness in their stride. Victor dismounted with the easy grace of a man accustomed to fine horses and finer things. He was exactly as she remembered, tall, silver-haired, handsome, in a cold, polished way. His companion was a younger man, in a deputy's uniform, looking uncomfortable and out of his depth. Mr. Thornton, I presume? Victor's voice carried across the yard, smooth as silk. I'm Victor Ashworth. I believe you have something that belongs to me. This is private property. Sam replied, his voice flat. State your business or leave. My business is simple. I'm looking for my fiancée, a woman named Margaret Hayes. I have reason to believe she's been working here under false pretenses. Maggie's nails dug into her palms. She wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to be anywhere but here. But Sam's words echoed in her mind. Fear only works if you let it, and she forced herself to step out of the barn and into the sunlight. Hello, Victor. His eyes found her immediately, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or satisfaction, the look of a hunter who had finally cornered his prey. Margaret, thank God. He started toward her. I've been worried sick. When you disappeared, I didn't disappear, I left. You were distraught. Your father's death, the stress of the arrangements. I understood. I forgave you. He was still moving, closing the distance between them. But it's time to come home now. We have a wedding to plan. Sam stepped into his path. The lady said she left, Sam said quietly. Seems to me that means she doesn't want to be found. Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went hard. This is a private matter between me and my fiancée. She's not your fiancée. She's my employee. Employee. Victor laughed a cold sound that made Maggie's skin crawl. Is that what she told you? Did she also tell you about the engagement contract her father signed? The dowry. I paid the legal obligations she's running from. I told him everything, Maggie said, including the parts you conveniently leave out. And what parts would those be? The bruises, the threats, the way you made sure I had nowhere to turn when my father died. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. You don't want a wife, Victor. You want a possession. Victor's mask slipped for just a second, long enough for Maggie to see the rage beneath. Long enough for Sam and Jake to see it too. Margaret, you're clearly confused, Victor said, his voice tight with controlled anger. The grief has affected your mind. Deputy Wilson here can attest that I've come to bring you home for medical treatment. I'm a doctor's daughter. I don't need medical treatment. You need help. Professional help. Victor turned to the deputy. You see how she is paranoid delusional, making wild accusations against the man who loves her. Deputy Wilson shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Ashworth, maybe we should take her into protective custody, for her own good. No! Sam's voice cut through the air like a blade. You're not taking her anywhere. This isn't your concern, Mr. Thornton. She's my employee. That makes it my concern. An employment contract doesn't supersede an engagement contract. It does when the engagement was obtained through coercion and maintained through violence. Victor's eyes narrowed. Be careful. You're making accusations you can't prove. Am I? Sam reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. This is a letter from the physician who treated Margaret's injuries after your last disagreement. Dr. Thomas Grant. He documented everything. Bruises on her arms, her ribs, her throat. He was too afraid to report it while your father was alive, but he's willing to testify now. Maggie's breath caught. She hadn't known about any letter, hadn't known Dr. Grant had documented anything. Victor's face went pale beneath his tan. Where did you get that? Doesn't matter where I got it. What matters is where it'll end up if you don't turn around and ride out of here. You're bluffing. Try me. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Maggie watched Victor's face, watched him calculate odds and outcomes the way he calculated everything. Finally, he smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Very well, Mr. Thornton. You've won this round. But let me be clear. He stepped closer to Sam, close enough that their faces were inches apart. That woman is mine. She was promised to me, and I always collect what I'm owed. This isn't over. It won't be over until I have what belongs to me. She doesn't belong to you. She doesn't belong to anyone. We'll see. Victor turned and mounted his horse. Enjoy your little victory while it lasts. I'll be back. And next time, I won't be so polite. He rode away without looking back, the deputy trailing behind him. Maggie's legs gave out. Sam caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady around her. She buried her face in his chest and let the tears come, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. It's okay, Sam murmured into her hair. It's okay. He's gone. He'll come back. You heard him. He'll come back. Let him. Sam pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. I meant what I said, Maggie. I'm not letting him take you. Not today, not ever. The letter, she managed. How did you... Jake. Sam's mouth quirked. Turns out my little brother is better at investigation than I gave him credit for. He's been sending telegrams all week tracking down anyone who might have information about Ashworth's past. And Dr. Grant just sent a letter. Dr. Grant hated what Victor did to you. He hated himself for staying silent. When Jake contacted him, he jumped at the chance to help. Maggie laughed a wet, broken sound. I had no idea. You were too busy running to look back. But you've got people in your corner, Maggie, more than you know. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But she had seen Victor's face when he made his threat. She knew that look. It was the same look he'd worn the night she ran, the look that said he would rather destroy something than let it go. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. That night, Sam showed her the ring. They were sitting on the porch watching the stars emerge one by one in the velvet sky. The tension of the day's confrontation still hummed in the air. But there was something else too, a fragile sense of hope that hadn't existed before. "Jake gave this back to me," Sam said, pulling the small gold band from his pocket. "After you arrived, he said I'd need it eventually." Maggie stared at the ring, catching the lamplight from the window. "Your mother's ring." "My grandmother's, actually. My grandfather gave it to her when they were married back in Pennsylvania. She passed it down to my mother and my mother." He swallowed hard. "My mother was wearing it the day she died." "Sam, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He turned the ring over in his fingers. "After my parents died, I swore I'd never give this ring to anyone who didn't deserve it, who didn't see me for who I really am. And you've been waiting 15 years. 15 years? He looked at her, his gray eyes reflecting the starlight. "I think I was waiting for you." "Sam, I'm not proposing. Not yet. It's too soon, and you've got enough to deal with without me adding pressure." He pressed the ring into her palm. "But I want you to hold on to this, as a promise. When this is over, when Victor is gone and you're safe, I'm going to ask you to marry me. And this ring will be part of that question." Maggie's hand closed around the gold band. It was warm from his touch, small and perfect, and weighted with more meaning than she could comprehend. "What if I say no? Then you say no, and I'll respect that, but at least I'll have tried." He smiled that rare, beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. "I'm done being afraid to try." She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. "I'm not afraid anymore either," she whispered. "Not with you." They sat there until the moon rose, two people who had been broken by life, learning how to be whole again. But the peace wouldn't last. At midnight, Jake burst through the door with news that would change everything. "The hotel!" He gasped out of breath from running. "Victor's not there. Hasn't been since this afternoon." Sam was on his feet instantly. "Where did he go?" "I don't know, but I found something else." Jake held up a telegram. "He's been sending messages to someone in Denver. Someone connected to the territorial government." "What kind of messages?" "Legal motions, land disputes. He's not just coming after Maggie anymore, Sam." Jake's face was grim. "He's coming after the ranch." Maggie's blood turned to ice. Victor hadn't left. He'd been planning. And they had no idea what he was planning to do. The telegram changed everything. Sam read it 3 times, his face growing darker with each pass. Jake stood by the door, still breathing hard, while Maggie clutched the ring in her palm like a lifeline. "He's claiming my father stole his land," Sam said finally, his voice flat with disbelief. "Says the original survey was fraudulent. That the Thornton Ranch was built on property that rightfully belongs to the Ashworth family." "That's insane!" Jake exploded. "Pa bought this land fair and square. We've got the deeds, the receipts, everything. Victor knows that. He's not trying to win in court." Sam set down the telegram. "He's trying to tie us up in legal proceedings long enough to bleed us dry. Lawyers cost money. Court appearances cost time. If we're fighting to keep the ranch, we can't focus on protecting Maggie." Maggie felt sick. "This is my fault." "Don't," Sam said sharply. "Don't you dare blame yourself for his evil." "But if I hadn't come here—" "If you hadn't come here, I'd still be a bitter fool throwing my mother's ring in the dirt." Sam crossed to her and took her hands. "Victor Ashworth is doing this because he's a monster. That's not your fault. That's his nature." "What do we do?" Jake asked. Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but Maggie could see the fury burning beneath. We find proof. Real proof. Victor's not as clean as he pretends to be. Nobody with that much money and that few scruples gets through life without leaving a trail. He looked at his brother. You've been digging into his past. Keep digging. There has to be something. And, in the meantime, we prepare for war. The next 3 days were chaos. Sam hired a lawyer from Denver, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Price, who arrived on the afternoon stage with a trunk full of legal documents and a reputation for never losing a case. Victor Ashworth, she said, reviewing the papers Sam had gathered. I know that name. His father made a fortune in textile manufacturing. Legal mostly, but there were always rumors. What kind of rumors? Maggie asked. The kind that involve workers dying in unsafe conditions and families being paid to keep quiet. Catherine looked up. The son is supposedly worse. Smarter about hiding it, but worse. Can you prove any of that? Not yet, but I have contacts in Boston who owe me favors. If there's dirt on Victor Ashworth, I'll find it. Meanwhile, Jake disappeared for 2 days on what he called research. He returned dusty and exhausted, but with a gleam in his eye that made Maggie nervous. I found something, he announced, bursting into the kitchen where Sam and Maggie were having breakfast. Something big. What? Sam set down his coffee. Victor Ashworth isn't Victor Ashworth. The silence that followed was deafening. Explain, Sam said slowly. Jake dropped into a chair, grinning like a man who had just found gold. I tracked down a clerk who used to work for Victor's father. Old man retired to a cabin outside Holbrook. He told me that Victor's real name is Vincent Crane. Maggie's heart stopped. What? Vincent Crane? Son of a factory foreman who died in a fire at the Ashworth textile mill. The original Victor Ashworth died of scarlet fever when he was 8 years old. Vincent's mother worked as a maid in the Ashworth household. When the real Victor died, old man Ashworth was so grief-stricken that he adopted Vincent and gave him his dead son's name. That doesn't make sense, Maggie said. Why would he do that? Because Vincent was already living in the house, had been for years. Jake's grin faded. The clerk thinks old man Ashworth was Vincent's real father, an affair with the maid that produced a son he couldn't publicly acknowledge. When his legitimate heir died, he saw an opportunity. Sam leaned back in his chair. So Victor Ashworth is actually an illegitimate child who inherited a fortune through deception. It gets better, or worse depending on how you look at it. Jake pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. The real Victor Ashworth had a sister. She married and had children before she died 10 years ago. Those children would be the legitimate heirs to the Ashworth fortune if anyone could prove that their mother's brother died without a legal heir. And Vincent Victor knows this. He has to. It's the only explanation for why he's so desperate to maintain control. Jake looked at Maggie. Your father's research, the connections he made, the reputation he built. Victor needs all of that to solidify his position. Without it, without you, he's vulnerable. Maggie's mind raced. She thought about Victor's obsessive need for control, his fury, when she'd tried to leave, his willingness to chase her across a continent. It had never been about love. It had barely even been about money. It had been about fear. He's afraid, she said slowly, afraid that someone will discover the truth. And that fear makes him dangerous, Sam said grimly. A cornered animal is the most deadly kind. Catherine Price was ecstatic when she heard the news. This is exactly what we needed, she said, pacing Sam's study with barely contained energy. If we can prove that Victor Ashworth is actually Vincent Crane, his entire legal standing collapses. The land claimed the engagement contract, everything becomes fraudulent. How do we prove it? Sam asked. We need documentation. Birth records, death records, anything that connects Vincent Crane to the Ashworth household. Catherine stopped pacing. The clerk Jake found would be a start, but his testimony alone won't be enough. We need paper. Paper that proves the real Victor Ashworth died and that Vincent Crane took his place. Where would that paper be? Boston. In the Ashworth family records or the city archives? Catherine frowned. But accessing those records will be difficult. Victor Vincent has powerful friends. If he suspects what we're looking for, he'll have everything sealed or destroyed. Then we don't let him suspect, Maggie said. Everyone turned to look at her. Victor thinks he's won, she continued. He thinks we're scrambling to defend against his land claim. He doesn't know we've discovered his secret. She took a deep breath. What if I go to him? Pretend I've changed my mind while he's distracted with me. Someone else can get to Boston and find the proof. Absolutely not, Sam said immediately. It makes sense. I said no. His voice was hard, his eyes blazing. You're not going anywhere near that man. Sam, listen to me. I've spent 3 weeks watching you heal, watching the fear slowly leave your eyes, watching you learn to trust again. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I'm not sending you back to the man who broke you. I won't do it. Find another way. There might not be another way. Then we'll make one. The argument was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats outside. Lots of hoofbeats. Jake moved to the window and went pale. Sam, you need to see this. They crowded around the window. Outside, a group of men on horseback had gathered in the yard. At their head sat Victor Ashworth, flanked by a man in a federal marshal's uniform. Samuel Thornton, the marshal called out. I have a warrant for the arrest of Margaret Hayes on charges of theft and fraud. Surrender her immediately. Maggie's knees buckled. Sam caught her arm, steadying her. What theft? He demanded through the window. What fraud? She stole valuable research materials from the Ashworth estate, research funded by Mr. Ashworth and legally his property. The marshal held up a document. I have sworn affidavits and a court order. This isn't a request, Mr. Thornton. It's a legal mandate. My father's research, Maggie whispered. The notes I took when I fled. Victor must have reported them as stolen. Did you take them? They were my father's work, his life's work. Victor had no right. She stopped, seeing the look on Sam's face. Yes, I took them, but they're not his property. They were never his property. Sam's jaw tightened. He turned back to the window. I need to see that warrant. Come out and I'll show you. I'm not walking into an ambush. Send the marshal alone with the document. Your men stay where they are. A tense pause. Then Victor nodded, and the marshal dismounted. Sam met him at the door. The warrant was real. The charges were detailed. The court order was signed by a judge. Maggie recognized a man Victor had bragged about controlling years ago. This is a setup, Sam said quietly to the marshal. You have to know that. What I know is that I have a job to do. The marshal looked uncomfortable, but determined. The lady can fight the charges in court. That's her right. But I have to take her into custody. And if I refuse to let her go, then I arrest you for obstruction and my men take her anyway. The marshal's voice softened. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Mr. Thornton. She'll get a fair trial. With Victor Ashworth's judge. That's not a trial. That's a lynching. Maggie touched Sam's arm. It's okay. It's not okay. It has to be. She stepped past him, facing the marshal with her chin high. I'll go with you, peacefully. Maggie, no. Sam, if you fight them, they'll arrest you too. Then who will find the proof? Who will clear my name? She forced a smile. Trust me, like I trusted you in the barn with the snake. Remember. His face crumpled. For one agonizing moment she saw beneath the walls, saw the terrified boy who had lost his parents, the wounded man who had been betrayed by everyone he let close. She saw how much it cost him to let her go. I'll find you, he said hoarsely. Whatever it takes. I'll find you, and I'll bring you home. I know you will. Victor was smiling as the marshal led her toward the horses. That cold, satisfied smile that haunted her nightmares. Hello again, Margaret, he said softly. I told you I always collect what I'm owed. She didn't respond, didn't give him the satisfaction. But as she mounted the horse they provided, she looked back at Sam standing on the porch of his ranch, his hands clenched at his sides, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. And she made a decision. She would not let Victor Ashworth destroy the man she loved. Whatever it took, whatever she had to sacrifice, she would end this, even if it meant ending herself. The jail in Silver Ridge was small and clean, which was more than Maggie had expected. The marshal, whose name she learned was Thomas Webb, seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the situation. "I don't like this any more than you do, miss," he said as he locked her cell. "But the law is the law." "The law can be bought," Maggie replied. "Victor Ashworth proved that." Marshal Webb didn't argue. He just looked tired. That night alone in her cell, Maggie allowed herself to cry. Not for herself, she'd made her peace with whatever was coming, but for Sam. For the hope she'd glimpsed in his eyes, the future they might have had. She cried for the ring still hidden in her pocket, warm against her thigh. The ring she couldn't bear to part with even now. She was still awake at midnight when she heard footsteps. "Maggie!" Her head snapped up. Jake stood on the other side of the bars, dressed in dark clothes, a ring of keys in his hand. "What are you doing here?" "Getting you out." He fumbled with the lock. "Sam's plan. He's waiting outside of town with horses." "Jake, if you do this, you'll be fugitives, both of you. We'll be fugitives together." The lock clicked open. "Come on, we don't have much time." They slipped out the back of the jailhouse into the dark streets of Silver Ridge. Maggie's heart pounded so loud she was sure someone would hear it. "Where's Sam?" "Miller's Crossing, same place you first met." Jake's hand closed around her wrist. "Stay close. Stay quiet." They made it 2 blocks before Victor stepped out of the shadows. "I wondered if you'd try something like this," he said conversationally. He wasn't alone. 4 men flanked him, all armed. "The marshal was very accommodating when I suggested additional security might be needed." Jake pushed Maggie behind him. "Let her go, Ashworth." "That's not my name." Victor's smile was razor sharp. "But I suppose you knew that already. Your brother's been busy. We know everything. Your real identity, your father's deception, the legitimate heirs you've been hiding from. It's over." "Is it?" Victor moved closer. "Tell me, Mr. Thornton, did you find any proof, any documentation, any evidence that would hold up in court?" Jake hesitated. "I thought not." Victor gestured to his men. "Take her. Kill him." "No," Maggie screamed. Everything happened at once. Jake drew his gun. Victor's men drew theirs. Shots exploded in the darkness, muzzle flashes lighting up the night like lightning. Jake fell. Maggie dropped to her knees beside him. Blood spread across his shirt, dark and terrible. His eyes were wide with shock. Jake, look at me." "Maggie." His voice was weak. "Run. You have to run. I'm not leaving you." "Tell Sam." He coughed and blood bubbled at his lips. "Tell him I'm sorry. For everything. Tell him yourself. You're going to be fine. You're going to—" His hand went limp in hers. "No." The word tore out of her like a scream. "No, no, no!" Victor's men grabbed her arms, dragging her away from Jake's body. She fought like a wild thing, scratching, biting, kicking. It didn't matter. There were too many of them. "Such drama," Victor said, watching her struggle. "Your father was the same way, passionate to the end." The words cut through her grief like a blade. "What did you say? Did you really think your father died of natural causes?" Victor leaned close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the madness dancing in his eyes. "He was going to cut me out of the research, going to take everything I'd invested and give it to some university. I couldn't allow that." "You killed him." "I expedited his passing. Heart attacks are so common in men his age." Victor shrugged. "Just like tragic accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. Your new friends, for instance." Horror washed through her. "You're going to kill Sam." "I'm going to take everything he has. His ranch, his reputation, his brother's life." Victor's smile widened. "And then I'm going to make you watch while I destroy everything he ever cared about. That's the price for humiliating me, Margaret. That's what happens when you run." She stopped struggling, stopped fighting, let her body go limp in the grip of Victor's men. "You're right," she said quietly. Victor's eyebrows rose. "I beg your pardon." "You're right. I can't beat you. I can't escape you. I can't protect anyone from you." She lifted her eyes to his. "But I can tell you where the proof is. The documentation that exposes who you really are. I can give you that, and you can destroy it, and this can all be over." "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired of running. I'm tired of watching people die for me." Her voice cracked. "I just want it to stop. Please, just make it stop." Victor studied her for a long moment. She could see him calculating, weighing the risks and rewards. "Where?" he finally asked. "Not here. I'll show you. But you have to promise, you have to swear that you'll leave Sam alone. That once you have what you want, you'll go back to Boston and never touch him or his ranch. You're in no position to bargain. Then kill me. Kill me right here and never find out where those documents are. Because I'm the only one who knows Victor. I'm the only one who can save you." The lie came easily. She had no idea where the proof was, didn't even know if it existed, but she saw the flicker of doubt in Victor's eyes, the fear that had driven him for so long. He believed her. "Very well," he said. "Show me." She led them into the darkness, away from Jake's body, away from any hope of rescue. But as they walked, she slipped her hand into her pocket and felt the cool metal of Sam's mother's ring. She had a plan. It was a terrible plan, and it would probably get her killed, but it was all she had. They stopped at an old mine shaft outside of town, abandoned for years and supposedly haunted by the ghosts of miners who died in a collapse. "It's in there," Maggie said, pointing to the entrance. "My father hid copies of his research in a safety box. He was paranoid about his work being stolen. He told me about this place before he died." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe he hid important documents in an abandoned mine. I expect you to believe he was dying and afraid, and desperate to protect his life's work from the man who was killing him." Maggie's voice was steady, despite the terror clawing at her chest. "You want the proof it's inside. Go get it yourself." "I'm not a fool. You first." "Fine." She walked into the darkness without hesitation. Victor followed, a lantern in one hand and a pistol in the other. His men stayed at the entrance, guarding against anyone who might follow. The tunnel stretched deep into the earth, the air growing cooler and mustier with each step. Maggie counted her paces, waiting for the right moment. "How much farther?" Victor demanded. "Not far." "This better not be a trick, Margaret." "It's not a trick. I'm giving you exactly what you want." She stopped at a junction where two tunnels branched off in different directions. Ancient support beams lined the walls, wooden and rotting, and barely holding back tons of rock. "Here," she said. "He hid it behind that beam." Victor moved past her, holding up his lantern to examine the beam she'd indicated. His back was to her. His attention was elsewhere. "Now." Maggie grabbed the lantern and threw it at the support beam with all her strength. The glass shattered. The oil spread. The old dry wood caught fire instantly. Victor spun around, his face twisted with rage. "What have you done?" "What my father couldn't." Maggie backed toward the tunnel entrance. "I'm ending this." The fire spread faster than she'd expected, racing up the support beam and igniting the ancient timbers around it. The tunnel groaned, a deep, ominous sound that vibrated through the earth. Victor lunged for her. She dodged, scrambling over rocks and debris. His hand caught her dress, tearing the fabric, but she wrenched free and kept running. Behind her, the ceiling began to collapse. She ran blindly through the darkness, stumbling and falling and picking herself up again. The roar of falling rock filled her ears, drowning out everything else. Victor's screams, her own heartbeat, the desperate prayer she was whispering over and over. She saw light ahead, the entrance, safety. 10 feet, 5 feet, 2 feet. She burst out of the tunnel just as the entire structure collapsed behind her. The noise was deafening, a thunderous avalanche of stone and earth that seemed to shake the whole world. Dust billowed out of the entrance, choking her, blinding her. Victor's men stood frozen, staring at the destruction. Then one of them raised his gun. "You killed him," he snarled. "You killed him, you." The shot never came. Instead, there was the sound of hoofbeats, dozens of them. And then Sam was there, riding at the head of what looked like half the men in Silver Ridge. Miguel was with him, and Ruth Pemberton, and a dozen others Maggie didn't recognize, but who all carried weapons and looked ready to use them. "Put down your guns," Sam ordered. "Now." Victor's men hesitated. Then slowly they complied. Sam was off his horse and at Maggie's side in seconds. His hands ran over her, checking for injuries while his eyes searched her face. "You're alive," he breathed. "Thank God you're alive." "Jake," she managed. "Victor shot him. I couldn't. I tried to stop the bleeding, but—" Sam's face went gray. "Where?" "Behind the jailhouse." "Sam, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He pressed his forehead to hers, just for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw with grief and relief, and something that sounded almost like wonder. "You collapsed a mine on Victor Ashworth. I had to stop him. He killed my father. He was going to kill you. By bringing down a mountain on him. It was the only plan I had." Sam let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "God help me, I love you." "I love you too." She pulled back to look at him. "But Jake, we have to go to Jake." "He's alive." Maggie's heart stopped. "What?" "Ruth found him. The bullet missed anything vital. He's at the docks right now, cursing a blue streak and demanding whiskey." Sam's eyes glistened. "He's going to be okay, Maggie. He's going to be okay." She collapsed against him, too overwhelmed to speak. Around them, the townspeople secured Victor's men and began the grim work of excavating the mine entrance. If Victor had survived, which seemed impossible, they would find him. If he hadn't, they would at least find his body. But Maggie didn't care about that anymore. She was safe. Sam was safe. Jake was alive. It was over. It was finally over. 3 days passed before they found Victor's body. The miners who volunteered for the excavation worked around the clock, pulling away rubble piece by piece. When they finally reached him, he was buried under 1,000 pounds of rock. His hand still clutching his pistol, his face frozen in an expression of disbelief. Maggie didn't go to see him. She didn't need to. The nightmare was over. But the healing was just beginning. Jake spent a week at Dr. Morrison's clinic complaining about the food and flirting with the nurse until she threatened to sedate him permanently. The bullet had passed clean through his shoulder, missing bone and artery by less than an inch. "Luckiest fool in Colorado," the doctor declared. "Another half-inch and we'd be planning a funeral instead of removing stitches." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Jake said with his trademark grin. "I'm just too pretty to die." Sam sat by his brother's bedside every day, their usual bickering replaced by something quieter. Something that looked a lot like gratitude. "You almost died for her," Sam said one afternoon when Maggie was down the hall fetching water. "I almost died for you," Jake corrected. "You were ready to tear the world apart to save her. I just helped speed things along." "That's not..." "Sam." Jake reached out and gripped his brother's hand. "I've watched you lock yourself away for 15 years. I've watched you refuse every chance at happiness because you were too scared to risk getting hurt. And then this woman shows up covered in dust and blood and stubborn as a mule, and suddenly you're alive again." He smiled. "That's worth a bullet. Hell, that's worth 10 bullets." Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I never said thank you for the ring, for believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. You're my brother. That's what brothers do." "I know, but still." "Thank you." Jake's grin softened into something real. "You're welcome. Now go propose to that woman before she comes to her senses and realizes she can do better." Catherine Price arrived from Denver with news that changed everything. She burst into Ruth's boarding house where Sam and Maggie were having dinner, her face flushed with triumph. "I found it," she announced. "The proof. Everything." She spread a stack of documents across the table. Birth certificates, death records, letters, financial statements. A paper trail that stretched back 40 years and exposed every lie Victor Ashworth, Vincent Crane, had ever told. The real Victor Ashworth died of scarlet fever at age 8, Catherine explained. His death certificate was filed in Boston, but mysteriously disappeared from the archives 10 years ago. I found a copy in a church record that the Ashworth family apparently didn't know existed. "And Vincent Crane?" Sam asked. "Born to a factory worker named Thomas Crane and a maid named Eleanor Crane, except Eleanor's maiden name was Ashworth. She was Old Man Ashworth's cousin, which means Vincent was legitimate Ashworth blood, just not through the proper channels." Catherine smiled grimly. When the real Victor died, the old man saw an opportunity to salvage his legacy. He adopted Vincent, changed his name, and raised him as his own son. The only people who knew the truth were the family servants, and most of them were paid off or threatened into silence. "What about the legitimate heirs?" Maggie asked. "The real Victor's sister's children." "That's where it gets interesting." Catherine pulled out another document. Victor's sister Elizabeth married a man named Robert Whitmore. They had 2 children before Elizabeth died. Those children, Samuel and Margaret Whitmore, would be the rightful heirs to the Ashworth fortune. Maggie's blood ran cold. "What did you say?" "Samuel and Margaret Whitmore. They're in their 30s now, living in—" "No." Maggie's hand trembled as she reached for the document. "The names. Samuel and Margaret." Catherine frowned. "Yes. Why?" Maggie stared at the paper, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Samuel Whitmore. Margaret Whitmore. The same names as her parents. "My mother's maiden name was Whitmore," she whispered. "Margaret Whitmore. She died when I was 3. The room went silent. "That's not possible," Sam said slowly. That would mean I'm one of the legitimate heirs." Maggie's voice shook. "Victor wasn't just trying to control my father's research. He was trying to eliminate a threat to his inheritance." Catherine's eyes widened. "Dear God, he knew. He must have known who you really were." He knew. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. That's why he insisted on the engagement. That's why he killed my father. If he married me, he could control the threat. If he eliminated my father, he removed the only person who might have connected the dots. "But your father never told you." "He was protecting me. He must have been protecting me." Tears spilled down Maggie's cheeks. All those years he knew who I was, who my mother really was, and he never said a word, because he knew what Victor would do if the truth came out. Sam pulled her into his arms, holding her while she processed the impossible revelation. Her entire life had been built on lies, not malicious ones, but lies nonetheless. Her father had loved her enough to keep her safe at the cost of her heritage, and Victor had loved nothing but power and money enough to destroy anyone who threatened them. "What happens now?" Sam asked Catherine over Maggie's head. "Now?" Catherine gathered the documents with careful precision. "Now we take this to the courts. With Victor dead and this evidence in hand, the Ashworth estate reverts to its rightful heirs, which means Maggie inherits a fortune," Sam finished. Maggie pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I don't want it." "What?" "I don't want his money. I don't want anything that came from that family." Her voice was fierce despite the tears. "My father spent his whole life trying to escape that legacy. He built something real, something good with his own hands. I'm not going to dishonor that by claiming blood money. Maggie, I could what? Buy a mansion, hire servants, become exactly the kind of person Victor wanted me to be." She shook her head. "No, give it to charity. Give it to the workers who suffered in those factories. Give it to anyone who needs it more than I do. But I don't want a single penny." Catherine looked at her with something like admiration. "You're certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Sam's arms tightened around her. "That's my girl." The legal proceedings took 2 months. Catherine Price navigated the courts with surgical precision, presenting evidence that demolished every claim Victor had ever made. The land dispute against Sam's ranch was thrown out. The theft charges against Maggie were dropped. The engagement contract was declared void due to fraud and coercion, and the Ashworth fortune, all $30 million of it, was placed in a charitable trust administered by a board that Maggie personally selected. The money would fund hospitals, schools, and worker protection programs across the country. "You're giving away a kingdom," Jake observed one afternoon as Maggie signed the final documents. "I'm building something better," she replied, "something that can't be used to hurt people." "Pa would be proud," Sam said quietly. "He always said the measure of a person wasn't what they took, but what they gave." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He had his moments." The ranch flourished that summer. With the legal troubles behind them, Sam threw himself into the work with renewed energy. The horses bred strong and healthy. The cattle grew fat on the summer grass. The hands, now including Miguel, who had been promoted to assistant foreman, worked with a loyalty born of respect rather than obligation. And Maggie worked alongside them. She tended the sick animals and trained the skittish ones, and slowly, day by day, transformed the ranch's modest veterinary operation into something remarkable. Word spread through the territory about the woman doctor who could heal horses that other vets had given up on. Ranchers came from 3 counties to seek her expertise. "You're going to put Dr. Morrison out of business," Jake teased her one evening. "Dr. Morrison only treats humans. I only treat animals. We're not competing." "Yet. Give it time. The animals like you better than he does." She threw a dish rag at his head. Sam watched these exchanges with quiet contentment. The ranch house that had been so empty for so long now rang with laughter and arguments, and the particular chaos that came from people who genuinely cared about each other. He'd forgotten what that felt like. He'd forgotten a lot of things, he realized. How to hope, how to trust, how to let someone see the broken parts of him without fear of judgment. Maggie had given all of that back to him. Now it was time to give her something in return. He planned the proposal for weeks. Jake helped, which meant there was a lot of teasing and a lot of terrible suggestions. What if you spelled out "marry me" with the cattle no too dramatic, but also genuine insight when it mattered? "Keep it simple," Jake advised. "Maggie's not a woman who needs grand gestures. She needs to know you mean it." "I mean it more than I've ever meant anything." "Then show her that. The rest is just decoration." Sam chose a Sunday evening in late August, when the summer heat had finally begun to ease, and the first hints of autumn colored the edges of the world. He led Maggie to the spot where they'd first kissed the porch of the ranch house, with the sun setting over the mountains in the distance. "Sam, what is this about?" Maggie asked as he positioned her facing the view. "You've been acting strange all day." "Have I?" "You burned breakfast. You put your shirt on inside out. You called Miguel by Jake's name 3 times. Maybe I've just been distracted." "By what?" "By this." He dropped to one knee. Maggie's hand flew to her mouth. "Margaret Hayes!" Sam began his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "I spent 15 years believing I would never find someone who saw me for who I really am. I built walls so high I couldn't see over them, and I told myself that was protection, when really it was just fear." He pulled out the ring, his mother's ring, polished and gleaming in the fading light. "Then you showed up with blood on your sleeve and fire in your eyes, and you demolished every wall I'd ever built. You challenged me. You frustrated me. You made me want to be a better man than I ever thought I could be." His voice cracked. "You gave me back my hope, Maggie. You gave me back my faith in the possibility of something good." Tears streamed down Maggie's face, but she didn't look away. She held his gaze with those honey-colored eyes that had captured him from the first moment he saw them. "I don't have a fortune to offer you," Sam continued. "I can't give you mansions or servants or the kind of life you were born to have. All I have is this ranch, these horses, and a heart that's been yours since the day we met." He held up the ring. "My mother wore this ring for 22 years. My grandmother wore it for 40 before her. It's not worth much in dollars, but it's worth everything to me. And I can't imagine giving it to anyone but you." He took a breath. "Margaret Hayes, will you marry me?" The silence stretched for one heartbeat. 2, 3. Then Maggie was on her knees beside him, her hands cupping his face, her lips pressed against his in a kiss that said everything words couldn't express. "Yes," she breathed when they finally broke apart. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Sam slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly as if it had been made for her. Maybe it had been. Maybe his mother had known somehow that one day a woman with honey-colored eyes would come along and bring her son back to life. "I love you," Sam said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you too." Maggie laughed through her tears. "Now stand up before you ruin your good trousers." He stood, pulling her up with him, and they stood together on the porch where their story had truly begun. In the distance, Jake let out a whoop that startled half the horses in the barn. "About damn time," he shouted from somewhere behind them. Maggie laughed and buried her face in Sam's chest. "How long has he been watching?" "Probably the whole time. He's not known for subtlety." "I noticed." They stood there until the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars emerged in the velvet sky. Two people who had been broken by life, finding wholeness in each other. The wedding took place on the first Saturday of September. It was nothing like the grand affair Victor had planned for them. There were no silk flowers imported from Paris, no orchestra from New York, no guest list of politicians and society matrons. Instead, there was the little church in Silver Ridge filled with ranch hands and townspeople, and anyone who wanted to witness the impossible, Samuel Thornton, the stone-hearted bachelor, finally taking a bride. Reverend Thomas Whitmore presided over the ceremony. He was 60 years old, white-haired, and kind-eyed, and he had known Sam since the day he was born. "I've been waiting for this moment for 15 years, he told Sam before the ceremony. "Your mother asked me to pray for you, you know, before she died. She asked me to pray that you'd find someone who could see past your walls. Did you?" "Every Sunday without fail." The Reverend smiled. "Seems like God was listening after all." Maggie walked down the aisle on Jake's arm, since she had no father to give her away. She wore a simple white dress that Ruth Pemberton had altered from her own wedding gown, and she carried wildflowers that the ranch hands had gathered from the meadow that morning. She had never looked more beautiful. Sam felt his throat tighten as she approached. This woman, this fierce, brilliant, stubborn woman, had chosen him. Out of all the possibilities in the world, she had chosen to spend her life with a broken rancher who had forgotten how to love. He would spend the rest of his days making sure she never regretted that choice. The vows they exchanged were traditional, spoken in the small church, with the summer sun streaming through the windows. But when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Sam kissed his bride for the first time as her husband, the cheers that erupted from the congregation were anything but traditional. Miguel was crying openly. Ruth Pemberton was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Even Catherine Price, who had traveled all the way from Denver for the occasion, looked suspiciously misty. And Jake was grinning so wide it looked like his face might split in two. "Took you long enough," he said when Sam and Maggie made their way back down the aisle. "Some things are worth waiting for," Sam replied. "Yeah." Jake's voice softened. "Yeah, they are." The reception was held at the ranch with tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung between the fence posts. There was food and music and dancing that lasted until well past midnight. Sam and Maggie danced their first dance to a fiddle tune that one of the ranch hands played swaying together under the stars. "Mrs. Thornton," Sam murmured against her hair. "Mr. Thornton," she replied. That's going to take some getting used to. We have time. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with joy. We have all the time in the world. And they did. The years that followed were everything Sam had never dared to hope for. Their first child came the following summer, a daughter with her mother's honey-colored eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. They named her Eleanor after Maggie's grandmother, and she was spoiled rotten by everyone on the ranch from the moment she drew her first breath. She's going to be trouble, Jake predicted, watching the infant wrap her tiny fingers around his thumb. She's going to be magnificent, Maggie corrected. 2 more children followed, a son named Thomas, after Maggie's father, who inherited Sam's love of horses and could ride before he could properly walk. And another daughter, Catherine, named after the lawyer who had helped them win their freedom, who had her mother's quick mind and her father's quiet intensity. The ranch continued to grow. Sam expanded the horse breeding operation, focusing on quality over quantity, and soon Thornton horses were sought after across the entire Western Territory. Maggie established a proper veterinary practice, training young people who came from as far as California to learn from her. And every evening when the work was done and the children were sleeping, Sam and Maggie sat on the porch together and watched the sun set over the mountains. Do you ever regret it? Sam asked one night many years later. Maggie looked at him, her face softened by age, but no less beautiful. Regret what? Giving away the fortune. You could have had everything, Maggie. Mansions, servants, a life of ease. I do have everything. She reached over and took his hand. I have you. I have our children. I have a home filled with love and purpose and meaning. She smiled. What could $30 million give me that I don't already have? A house that doesn't need a new roof every 5 years. She laughed, that full, rich laugh that still made his heart skip after all this time. The roof gives you something to complain about. You'd be bored without it. I would never be bored with you. Flatterer? Truth-teller. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Jake had married too, eventually a schoolteacher from Denver, who could match his wit word for word. They had 4 children of their own and lived in a house just over the hill, close enough for Sunday dinners and far enough for privacy. Never thought I'd see the day, Sam said when Jake announced his engagement. The eternal bachelor settling down. Had to keep up with my big brother, Jake replied. Can't let you have all the happiness. Ruth Pemberton lived to be 93 years old, and when she passed, half the town turned out for her funeral. She had been a mother figure to more people than anyone could count, and her boarding house became a memorial in her honor, a place where women fleeing dangerous situations could find safety and support. Maggie funded it from the profits of her veterinary practice. It was called Pemberton House, and over the years it helped hundreds of women start new lives. Ruth would be proud, Sam told her after the dedication ceremony. Ruth would say I'm being too sentimental and that there's work to be done, Maggie replied. That too. The children grew up strong and kind and brave. Eleanor married a lawyer from Boston and spent her life fighting for workers' rights, carrying on the legacy of the charitable trust her mother had established. Thomas took over the horse breeding operation when Sam finally admitted he was getting too old to manage it alone. Catherine became a doctor, a real doctor with credentials and everything, and opened a clinic in Silver Ridge that served anyone who needed care regardless of their ability to pay. They're all so much better than we were at their age, Sam observed one day watching his grandchildren play in the yard. They had better examples, Maggie said. They had you. I was just the grumpy rancher who came with the property. You were never grumpy. Stubborn maybe. Closed off definitely. But never grumpy. That's a generous interpretation? I'm a generous person. He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Yes, you are. You always were. On the 50th anniversary of their wedding, the entire family gathered at the ranch. There were so many people now. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, friends and neighbors, and people who had become family through years of shared work and shared joy. Tables stretched across the yard, laden with food that had been prepared for days. Music filled the air, and children ran laughing through the grass, while their parents called after them to slow down, be careful, watch where you're going, watch where. Sam stood on the porch watching it all, and felt his eyes burn with tears he didn't try to hide. Maggie came to stand beside him, her hand finding his with the ease of 50 years of practice. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "The day I threw my mother's ring in the dirt," he said quietly. "I was so certain I would never find anyone who loved me for myself. So certain that I was destined to be alone. And now." He looked at the chaos of people in his yard, at the children who bore his name and his blood, at the woman who had walked into his life with nothing but a trunk and a stubborn refusal to give up. "Now I know that the best things in life are the ones we never see coming." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You saved me, Maggie. Not just from loneliness or fear, but from myself. You showed me that it was possible to be seen and loved and accepted, walls and all. You gave me a family when I'd given up on ever having one." "You saved me too," she said softly. "You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You stood between me and every danger without ever asking for anything in return. You loved me when I didn't know how to let myself be loved. Seems like we saved each other." "Seems like we did." He kissed her, then slow and sweet, and somewhere behind them, their youngest great-grandchild squealed with delighted disgust. "Gross," the child announced. "Great-grandma and great-grandpa are being mushy again." "Get used to it, kid," Jake's voice called out. "They've been like that for 50 years, ain't gonna stop now." Laughter rippled through the gathering. Sam smiled against Maggie's lips. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," she replied. And that was the truth of it. After everything, the pain and the fear and the years of running, the enemies and the friends and the battles won and lost, love was what remained. Love was what had saved them. Love was what had built this family from two broken people who had found in each other the missing pieces they'd stopped searching for. That evening, as the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Sam and Maggie sat on the porch one last time. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose and purple. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and peaceful, filled with the evidence of a life well lived. "No regrets?" Maggie asked. "Not a single one." "Me neither." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. 50 years ago, he had been a man with a heart of stone and a future of nothing but emptiness. Then she had arrived, a woman with blood on her sleeve and fire in her eyes, carrying nothing but a trunk and a determination to survive. She had brought him back to life. She had given him everything. And now, sitting on this porch in the golden light of sunset, surrounded by the family they had built together, Sam Thornton finally understood what his mother had known all those years ago. Some things are worth waiting for. Some people are worth fighting for. And love, real love, the kind that sees past walls and heals old wounds and builds something beautiful from broken pieces, love is always worth the risk. He had refused every woman in the country. He had waited without knowing he was waiting. And she had arrived exactly when she was meant to, carrying nothing but a trunk and a heart brave enough to love a man who had forgotten how to let himself be loved. This was their story. Not a story of grand gestures and sweeping romance, but of patience and healing, and two broken people who found in each other the missing pieces they had stopped searching for. It was in the end a love story. The best kind, the quiet kind, the kind that lasts.